The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus spoke this parable to his disciples. For it is if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground, and he hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents. Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you are a harsh man, reaping what you did not sow, and gathering what you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap what I did not sow and gather what I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this wicked slave, throw him out into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The Gospel of the Lord.
It's a privilege for me yesterday to be able to be at St. Peter's Cathedral for the ordination of 5 new permanent deacons to our Diocese of London, which took place yesterday morning. And some of you may know one of those 5 new ones is part of our family of parishes, Jeff Sylvester, whose home parish is St. Anne's Parish in Tecumseh. If you've never been to an ordination of a deacon, it's a beautiful ceremony. And after we have the liturgy of the word and the homily by the bishop, then we have the presentation of the candidate. We have the litany of saints, which is prayed together, sung together, very beautiful. There are certain promises or vows which the candidates are asked, such as obedience to the bishop, promising to pray the liturgy of the hours for all of us, for the church, for the rest of their lives, and to grow in their likeness to Christ. And then there's the laying on of hands. The bishop actually imposes hands on those who are being ordained, a prayer of consecration. Then there's a very symbolic gesture right after that of the presentation of the book of the Gospels, where the bishop hands the newly ordained deacon a book of the Gospels and says, "Receive the gospel of Christ, whose herald you now are. Believe what you read, teach what you believe, and practice what you teach. Powerful words, and great message for all of us, not just those being ordained deacons, but all of us as Christians are to do that, to believe what we read, teach what we believe, and practice what we teach. The deacon, you'll be meeting him shortly if you haven't met him yet, but in the coming weeks he'll be part of our cycle of preaching and stuff within our family of parishes. So besides preaching, a deacon can also baptize, can also marry people, and can also do funerals outside of a mass. So I like to say that a deacon can hatch, match, and dispatch. See the origin of the ministry of deacons from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 6, when the bishops or the apostles are receiving these complaints from the Hellenist or the Greek women about their widows being neglected in the daily distribution of the food. And then the apostles say, yes, it's an important ministry, but we don't have time for that ourselves because we should be more involved with prayer and ministry of the word. So they find 7 men of good repute, they lay hands on them, ordain them in effect to the ministry of deacon, and then we immediately see this development in their ministry from just simply serving the poor, looking after the widows and those who are in need, to also a ministry of the word. And we see this in the deacon Stephen, who is the first martyr. He very powerfully begins preaching. He gets stoned to death because of that. And then we see the deacon Philip kind of taking up that ministry right after as well, and him having powerful experiences in miracles and conversions as well. So there's kind of twofold a ministry of service and a ministry of the word that is in the deacon's ministry. So look forward and please pray for our new deacon, Deacon Jeff Sylvester. One of the themes for today's readings, and one of the themes which is recurring over the coming few weeks at the end of ordinary time and into the beginning of the season of Advent, is of the second coming of Christ. Next week we celebrate the feast of Christ the King, of Jesus coming at the end of time as a King of the universe. And even in the beginning weeks of Advent, the theme is of the coming of Jesus at the end of time as well. And we'll hear this recurring message in the gospel and the readings of the coming weeks to stay awake, to be prepared, because we don't know the day or the hour. It's interesting that the apostles believed that Jesus' return would be during their lifetime, and it's probably for that reason that they didn't write right away the Gospels, but it was 30, 40, 50 years later when they realized, okay, Jesus' return isn't as soon as we thought it was going to be. So there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of expectation that every generation of Christians is to have as to the return of the Lord. Jesus could come again today. He could come tomorrow. He could come again 1,000 years from now. We don't know. Jesus himself says only the Father knows. So we have this message to be awake, be prepared. And that is in being in good relationship with God and a good relationship with other people as well. Another theme from our readings today is that of stewardship. And we recognize that from this parable today and from other parables that we're not owners in a sense of anything. God is the owner. We are the stewards or managers of creation. We're the managers. We're not even the owners of ourselves. We're managers, and we are at one point going to have to give an account for how we've used the resources entrusted to us during our lives. It's interesting that in the parable today of the 5 talents given to one person, the 2 talents to another servant, and 1 talent to another, that a talent is a very large sum of money, and they were to give an account as to how they dealt with that. And see the first 2, the one with the 5 talents and the one with the 2, making good use of those, using them, putting to use, earning more. And the third one with the 1 talent, simply burying it in the ground. And it's interesting that this term talent, we can also understand it to be as we understand the term talents too, a gift, an ability, something we're good at, that we're meant to share with others. We're meant to build up the kingdom of God and share our resources, share our gifts with other people as well. Today is also the World Day of the Poor, and this is the 7th year of the World Day of the Poor. This is something that Pope Francis has begun a number of years ago, and he sent out a special message for today for the World Day of the Poor. I'd just like to share a few selections from that with you. The whole message is excellent. It's only about 6 pages long if you want to look it up on the internet. Pope Francis World Day of the Poor message for 2023. He begins by saying this: the 7th annual World Day of the Poor is a fruitful sign of the Father's mercy and a support for the lives of our communities. As its celebration becomes more and more rooted in the pastoral life of the Church, it enables us to discover ever anew the heart of the gospel. Our daily efforts to welcome the poor are still not enough. A great river of poverty is traversing our cities and swelling to the point of overflowing. It seems to overwhelm us. So great are the needs of our brothers and sisters who plead for our help, support, and solidarity. For this reason, on the Sunday before the solemnity of Jesus Christ, King of the universe, we gather around his table to receive from him once more the gift of strength to live lives of poverty and to serve the poor. And he goes and quotes a passage from Tobit, the book of Tobit, "Do not turn your face away from anyone who is poor." He talks quite a bit about the book of Tobit and some of the messages of that. If you haven't read it, it's an Old Testament book. It's pretty short. It's a fascinating read. Two of the interesting points about that book that are not brought out by Pope Francis, but I just thought I'd share with you. One is that it's the only book that mentions the Archangel Raphael, who accompanies Tobias and Sarah on their journey and who heals Tobit of his blindness. What the Pope does bring out in the book is Tobit's instructions to his son before his journey, and his charity is concern for the poor, and instructing his son to look after those who are poor, those who are in need. Tobit's blindness comes about because he was so exhausted after leaving what he was doing to go and bury someone who had died but was just left in the streets. He comes back, he lays down under a tree, and bird droppings fall in his eyes, and he goes blind. Interesting, different type of story, but the Archangel Raphael goes and brings him that healing. It's interesting, too, the number of other times in Scripture, such as in the Acts of the Apostles, where we see God rewarding very generously anyone who is kind towards other people, especially those who help the poor. And we see in the Acts of the Apostles 21, Cornelius, and an angel saying to him, "Your prayer has been heard, and your gifts to the poor have been noticed by God." Earlier on in the Acts of the Apostles, we have this interesting woman named Dorcas or Tabitha, and she's a trader in purple clothes, and it says that she was devoted to good works and to acts of charity. And it's her that Peter raises from the dead after she dies of a sudden illness. There's a neat expression that I heard one time that God is never outdone in generosity. If we're generous to the Lord in the poor, we get that back many times over in many blessings of all sorts of ways. God is never outdone in generosity. Another interesting part about the book of Tobit, beside the Archangel Raphael, is the number of times that it mentions the dog that accompanied Tobias and Sarah on the journey. It's kind of interesting and strange, but a beautiful little passage, especially appreciated by dog lovers out there, is, "Then the dog, which had been with them in the way, ran before them, and coming as if he had brought the news, showed his joy by wagging his tail." There's a lot of different writing about that as to this kind of odd, interesting tidbit of information in the middle of the book of Tobit, but we see perhaps the author was a dog lover himself. I've had a few black labs. They're great dogs, wonderful companions, and I enjoyed this passage in the book of Tobit as well. But again, the Pope bringing out Tobit's charity towards other people as a great example for us. "To all those who practice righteousness, give alms from your possessions," is the instruction he gives to his son Tobias on the journey. The Pope talks about new forms of poverty, and he mentions war in particular. He doesn't specifically talk about the war currently going on in Israel and Gaza or the war in Ukraine right now, and we're certainly to keep praying for peace in the world and a quick resolution to those conflicts, but talks about other causes of poverty as well, and talks about the dramatic price increases in food around the world. And we see those who are involved in groups like St. Vincent de Paul see this huge increase in number of people using food banks or St. Vincent de Paul or other agencies just to get by every day. The Pope talks about inhumane treatment of some laborers, inadequate pay for work done, job insecurity, accident-related deaths. And he quotes Pope John Paul II. He says, "The primary basis of the value of work is man himself. However true it may be that man is destined for work and called to it, in the first place, work is for man and not man for work." Pope talks about different struggles of our times, and he goes and gives a lengthy thank you to those who are volunteering and helping, taking care of the poor in any way or form. Just like to share that paragraph with you. Pope Francis writes, "Let us thank the Lord that so many men and women are devoted to caring for the poor and the excluded. They are persons of every age and social status who show understanding and readiness to assist the marginalized and those who suffer. They are not superheroes, but next-door neighbors, ordinary people who quietly make themselves poor among the poor. They do more than give alms. They listen, they engage, they try to understand and deal with difficult situations and their causes. They consider not only material, but also spiritual needs, and they work for the integral promotion of individuals. The kingdom of God becomes present and visible in their generous and selfless service. Like the seed that falls on good soil, it takes root in their lives and bears rich fruit. Our gratitude to these many volunteers needs to find expression in prayer that their testimony will increasingly prove fruitful. In my short 4.5 months that I've been here in this family of parishes, I've noticed a wonderful ministry that's being done and wonderful care that's being taken to look after those who are in need. In the St. Vincent de Paul Societies, or many other different ways, different things going on altogether. There's a Christmas giving tree here, and there's hardly anything left as you've all taken things already to bring gifts for the poor, which is fantastic. A few weeks ago, I got out, I'm not sure if you know Deacon Mike Rovers, a retired deacon from our family of parishes, but he's begun a ministry called Second Chance Ministries. And I was riding with him, and he had 17 calls to do that day. We had a couple volunteers that went around, and as he's going around, as we're driving around all over the city of Windsor and Tecumseh, there was calls coming in almost continually to his cell phone. And to hear him dealing so patiently, so generously, so kindly with all the people calling in with their needs and saying, okay, we can come and see you on Tuesday, it was fantastic to see. So I'd just like to join my thanks to that of the Pope for all of you and for all those that you do for helping and looking after the poor. And just one final quote from Pope Francis. Towards the end of the document, he reminds us, the poor are persons. They have faces, stories, hearts, and souls. They are our brothers and sisters, with good points and bad, like all of us. And it is important to enter into a personal relation with each of them.